Hey, what's going on? I'm Matt O'Leary back with another video, and today I'll be talking Trevor Lawrence and his comments on the Dan Patrick Show. But before we get started, just wanted to mention you can follow along with me on social media at Matt O'Leary NY on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff. And if you haven't already, please make sure to check out the podcast. New episodes drop every Wednesday. You can call in, leave me your question. I'll try to get to it on the show. So Trevor Lawrence made an appearance on the Dan Patrick Show, and it was a nice long interview. I'll link the interview down in the description below if you want to watch the whole thing. But this one spot really stuck out to me because he was asked point blank about the New York Jets.
How can you not let the situation with the Jets affect you? Or at least, that you could end up in New York if they don't win and you're the number one pick. You don't get to pick where you want to go. And that's really difficult for, somebody just starting out. But how prepared are you to do something like that?
I mean, I think I'm ready. I think just being here at Clemson, my journey has taught me a lot. I've grown up a lot the past few years, and I'm really just ready to take on whatever challenge it is, and just to have the opportunity.
To no surprise to anyone, Trevor Lawrence says that he is up for the challenge, which means I don't think he's pulling an Eli Manning, and I don't think he is going back to school. That argument never made any sense to begin with. Let's start with the going back to school. He's graduating early, so why would he want to go back? He would be passing up on potentially somewhere around $30 million plus if he's drafted first overall, which he's going to be when he comes out. It's just the logic there that he would go back to school doesn't make any sense. Even if they were to lose and not win a national championship, he already has a national championship at Clemson. It makes no sense why you'd want to risk giving up millions and millions of dollars to go back to college to play for free. That doesn't make any sense. I don't care how much you love playing at Clemson and playing in college. It just makes zero sense. I never bought it for a second. Why would he want to return back to school when you're the consensus number one overall pick and pass up millions of dollars? I don't get that. Now, the second part that I also found found interesting was the notion, and it was just rhetoric driven up by the media, but why Trevor Lawrence would want to avoid the New York Jets. Now, look, I get it. I am critical of the New York Jets all the time. They've been really, really bad for the last decade. There's no denying that. They made a lot of bad decisions. But when you look at teams who are drafting first overall, when you're going to get picked first overall, there is never a good team picking that high. There's a reason why these teams are picking where they are. Just let's look at recent history. The Browns were coming off a winless season. They draft Baker Mayfield, and they look like they're on the verge of going to the playoffs right now. Then you look at Cincinnati. Awful team. Cincinnati and the Jets are absolutely comparable. And Joe Burrow didn't say, you know what? I don't want to go to Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm going to force myself out and play somewhere else. Or the Colts, the year with Andrew Luck. Peyton Manning got hurt. Yes, that organization was a little bit more well-run, but they were absolutely moving on from Peyton Manning and going to take a quarterback once they were put in that position to. And when you look at the New York Jets, of course this team has been really bad, but let's not ignore the obvious signs of growth in the past year. Yes, this team is probably going 0-16. More than likely, this team won't win a game, but they have 2 picks in the first round this year. They are going to trade Sam Darnold for likely another second-round pick, let's say. So that's 2 picks in the second round. They have 2 picks in the third round. They'll have about $100 million of cap space. They will have they already have a general manager that is well-respected around the league and someone that I trust who had a really good draft in 2020. And they'll be hiring a new coach. That is appealing. And one, Trevor Lawrence will be a recruiting tool to hire a really high candidate coach because they're going to want to work with him. But how is that not appealing to a young quarterback? And just, we're not going to even get to the New York part. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But just a team that has multiple draft assets in the early rounds over the next 2 years to build you up. a new coach and a well-respected general manager and a ton of cap space. So they're going to spend in free agency. Sure, they're not going to sign every single big free agent, but it's going to be a much more aggressive offseason than what we saw last year from Joe Douglas, without a doubt. Now let's get to the New York aspect. Yes, the Giants are the bigger New York team. There's no denying that. They have the more history. They are much more well-run. There's no denying that, even as a Jets fan. But this is still the biggest market in the world, New York. So if you come to New York, the opportunities that you have from a marketing perspective, from a branding perspective of yourself, is so much more than the ones that you would have in the potential other places that he could force himself to. Why would you want to force your way out of New York so you can go to play in what? Jacksonville? Washington? Where are you forcing yourself out of? He's not going to force his way to the Atlanta Falcons. That's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Or the Cowboys. Not a thing. If the Jets were forced to trade out of the pick, it's not going to be very far and would likely be Jacksonville or Washington. Those are the two names that come to mind. But still, let's not pretend like Washington doesn't have their own ownership issues. And come on, their games are getting blacked out in Jacksonville. No one gives a damn about that team down there. I'm sorry. That's just the reality of the situation. I know some people say, well, Pat Mahomes does really well in Kansas City, which is a small market, which is absolutely true. But one, they are a historic franchise, even if they are in a smaller market. And two, don't you think Patrick Mahomes would be an even bigger star if he was in New York? Like, that's the thing. Ask Odell Beckham Jr. if you'd rather come back to New York and do what he was doing or in Cleveland. Nobody cares about him in Cleveland. But when he was in New York, he was getting all the headlines and drumming up so much. Some of it was controversy. Some of it was a little bit stretched out, if you ask me. But he was so much a bigger star in New York. And if you come here and win in New York, he will be a legend. Look at Joe Namath and how he is recognized for not only what he did with the Jets and here in New York, but just his overall legacy around the league. He is remembered as this legendary figure. He's someone who threw more interceptions in his career than touchdown passes. And I know it's a different era. I'm not saying he was an awful quarterback by any stretch of the imagination, but if he doesn't win that Super Bowl, is he remembered the same way as he is with that Super Bowl win? And is he as much of a legend if he does what he did in, I don't know, I'm going to say Jacksonville. Obviously, we know that Jacksonville wasn't a team around then, but pick a smaller market team. I don't know, the Minnesota Vikings. Probably not. He probably isn't. And New York is the biggest place, the biggest growth opportunities. Again, I understand that this team has been bad for a really long time. I get that, but we're not going to just put the blinders on and say, oh, this team is always going to be bad, when in reality, even with their poor ownership issues in Woody Johnson, from 2000, when they took over, through 2011, that was a pretty damn good run. They went to the playoffs a lot over that time. 2010 AFC Championship games, 2009 AFC Championship, the 2008 season, we know that didn't end with a playoff appearance, but they were pretty damn good with Brett Favre before he got hurt. 2006, they made the playoffs. 2004, they made the playoffs and were Doug Bryan field goal away from going to an AFC title game. 2002, 2001, they were a playoff team. In 2000, they were 8-8 after moving on from a legendary head coach. They only had losing seasons in 2003, 5, and 7. They had 3 losing seasons in their first, 11, 12 seasons of owning the team. So yes, you can have success even with bad ownership. Of course, in a perfect world, you move on from ownership, they sell the team, and you get competent owners in here. But let's not pretend that just because the last 5 years especially have been particularly brutal and the last decade overall has been particularly bad with them not making the playoffs, that you can't turn this thing around under this ownership, because we've seen it before. So you just have to get the hire right, of course. But you know what also helps? Getting a generational prospect. He's not going to force his way out. You heard it out of the horse's mouth finally, but it never made sense to begin with. So I'm glad we got this information today or yesterday, because the notion, or again, I'll use the word rhetoric, because I was never buying it, that Trevor Lawrence was either going to A, return to school, or B, force his way out of New York, LOL, was ridiculous. So I'm glad that we heard that he is up for any challenge, and it's exactly what I expected. So can we put the rumors to bed now, please? Let me know in the comments what you think of this, or on social media at Matt O'Leary NY. Make sure to subscribe if you're new here, and I'll talk to you next time.